Yo, what is up, everybody? It is probably the first time you've seen my face in a while during quarantine. I've been posting a lot of videos where I'm not in them, but you get to see me smiling again. That is, of course, assuming that I smile at any point during this video. But there's not a whole lot of movies out right now, and there's plenty of stuff I could watch on Netflix and review, but I just haven't really gotten around to doing that. I don't like Netflix movies that much, but I do want to try something new. So, in the same vein in which I reviewed all the Star Wars films before Episode 9 came out, and all the MCU films before Avengers Endgame came out, I don't know when Soul has been rescheduled to, but I'm going to try to review every Pixar movie before Soul comes out. And even though I have reviewed 2 of them already, Toy Story 4 and Onward, I'll be rewatching and re-reviewing them for the purpose of this whole thing. Just like I did with Ant-Man and the Wasp and Infinity War for the MCU. But today, I'm just going to talk about my favorite movies that have come out every year since I was born. So we're going from 1999 to 2020. And the reason that I feel comfortable doing this year is because most of the year's biggest movies got pushed back to like December, November, that time period, or straight until next year. And with that being the case, unless something incredible happens with Dune or Tenet, I feel comfortable with my 2020 pick being my 2020 pick overall. So, let's go ahead and get started. Now, do please try to remember... Okay, I want to set a couple rules first. Do try to remember that this is my favorite movies of every year since I was born. This is not your favorite movies. This is not the objectively best films of each year, right? I will probably put some things on this list that you don't agree with, or that you don't think I should have. I don't care. This is just how I feel. It's how it's going to be. Also, there are a couple of ties on this list. It was very difficult to get through some of these years without tying, because I loved some of the films equally. So, let's go ahead and dive right into 1999. And how fitting is it that the first year has the first tie? 1999 goes to both The Green Mile and The Matrix. The Matrix is one of my favorite action movies of all time. And I think that it does such a good job of creating the world that The Matrix takes place in. And it's the only one that doesn't jump the shark, 2 and 3 get really ridiculous, but 1 seems just grounded enough because you know that the movie takes place in a computer, so the things that happen aren't possible, but it's never immersion breaking the level of ridiculousness that happens in the first movie. So it's easy to keep track of, and I think it's perfectly put together. The Green Mile is one of the most emotional movies I've ever seen in my life. I think it's one of Tom Hanks' best performances. It is Michael Clarke Duncan's best performance, and every time I watch it, I cry. I'm sorry. I think it's my favorite Stephen King adapted film as well. There's nothing that I don't love about the movie, and like I said, every time I watch it, it messes with my heart. And so they both get best movie of that year for me. Sorry that I did not put The Phantom Menace here or whatever else. That's just where I'm at with 1999. So let's move on. 2000, you got Unbreakable, and nothing even comes close. There is not a close second in 2000. Unbreakable is unequivocally M. Night Shyamalan's best work. You could say The Sixth Sense, but I think it's Unbreakable. I think that movie is perfectly paced. Bruce Willis isn't the greatest actor, but his type of performance fits David Dunn perfectly. Samuel L. Jackson is amazing as Elijah Price. Always. Always. And honestly, I think since it was the first What If Superheroes Were Among Us type of situation, I think it honestly does do it the best. The world outside our windows type of setting for that movie is perfect, and I don't think anything has done it as good since then. So that's 2000. 2001, Monsters Incorporated. Don't shout at me about Spirited Away, okay? I haven't seen it very recently, and I don't remember how I feel about it. I'm sure I love it, but I don't remember. I saw Monsters Inc. as recently as last December when I was out of town. So, I just got to say, it's my favorite movie from that year. It's honestly, my favorite Pixar movie shifts around sometimes. It can be Monsters Inc., it can be Ratatouille, it can be WALL-E, it can be The Incredibles, but it's usually, most of the time that you ask me, Monsters Inc. I think it's just such a such a well lived in world. Like, the thing about early Pixar movies is the worlds felt lived in. Like, they felt expertly crafted and perfectly tailored to the characters that live in it. And then the story of Monsters Inc., the whole lesson of like, oh, laughter is a better source of energy than fear anyway, so they have to change the ways. And it's like, oh, you knew that. You see Monsters Inc. I don't have to talk to you about it. I'm moving on. 2002, Stuart Little 2. I have seen this movie maybe 50 times. I just think it's such a sweet movie. It's super enjoyable. I think like every week I would watch it when I got home from school on Friday. It's so great. I love Michael J. Fox. I love Hugh Laurie. James Woods is in the movie. That's cool. But I just think that I don't know. I mean, like, the CGI on the animals is really good in that movie, considering that it's from the same year as the first Spider-Man movie, which is funny because I didn't put the first Spider-Man movie on here. And actually, I have in my notes here that Lilo and Stitch is a close second. Spider-Man's not even in here. But yeah, I just love Stuart Little 2 with like all my heart. It's one of my favorite movies ever. It's not one of the best made movies of all time, obviously, but it's one of my favorites, so deal with it. 2003, Kill Bill Volume 1. If you have been on my channel for any length of time, then you know I'm a Tarantino guy. I am a Tarantino guy. I love almost all of his work. I don't like Kill Bill Volume 2 that much, but we're talking about Volume 1. And I think that this movie is maybe tied with Old Boy. That's a great film. I do recommend it to anybody. Not the Josh Brolin one that I think was directed by Spike Lee. I'm talking about the original Old Boy from 2003. That's a great movie. I definitely recommend watching that. I also recommend watching Kill Bill. It's just, I don't know. You know, like, it just feels like such a good blend of like different genres. Like the way that Star Wars mixed Western and fairy tale and fantasy and all that stuff. I think Kill Bill mixes Westerns and like Shogun type films and revenge stories, and I don't know. I just like the first Kill Bill. 2004, The Incredibles. This probably doesn't surprise you, considering that I said that The Incredibles is sometimes my favorite Pixar movie. But I also really wanted The Punisher to be here because I have a lot of attachment to that movie. But unfortunately, it's just not really that good. I really enjoy it. But it's just, you know. Also, Howl's Moving Castle is alpha as fuck, but I just can't put it above The Incredibles. This is still too hot. But the thing with The Incredibles is that, like, it's just such a good, like, it's just such a neatly crafted story, you know? Like, oh man, like, I missed the glory days and I want them to come back, and so I'm gonna blah blah blah, all this stuff, and then it turns out that the whole thing was a lie anyway, and it was all for the purpose of Syndrome stealing the glory by making the supers obsolete. That's a really cool story. And it kind of ends up being parodied in Spider-Man Far From Home 15 years later. Who would have thought? But we're moving on. 2005 gives us our second tie of the event of the evening, and that is between V for Vendetta and Star Wars Episode 3: The Revenge of the Sith. Revenge of the Sith is my second favorite Star Wars movie. I think I've seen it the most. I've seen that movie easily like 20 something times. I think it does such a good job of painting the Jedi as not necessarily the bad guy, but as having a large part in their own downfall. That's something that people don't give the prequels credit for at all. It does a great job explaining what happened to the Jedi. It's not just, oh, Darth Vader. You know, it's the Jedi put Anakin on a path where he could become Darth Vader. I do want to do a video about that at some point. Anakin isn't to blame for what happened to him. The Jedi and Palpatine are. He was manipulated by both sides, and it just ended up happening the way that it did. And Anakin is definitely somebody that you're supposed to feel bad for when you're watching that movie. And then with V for Vendetta, it's so topical to what's happening in the world right now. Unless you're watching this video in the future. Like, if you're watching it next year, don't worry about what I'm talking about now. But the whole, like, a people rising up against their government, rising up against tyranny and injustice and stuff like that. It's such an inspiring and powerful message from 2005. I don't even know when the original, like, graphic novel came out. I think it's by Alan. It's not Alan Scott. Alan Moore. I think it's by Alan Moore, but I'm not 100% sure. I might be wrong. But like, I just think that message is really powerful. The performance by Hugo Weaving is amazing. Natalie Portman could have been swept up for just about any of the actors and gotten the same job done. But I really do think that like, and then like the ending with which spoilers for V for Vendetta, the idea that the movement doesn't die with V, and that it will be picked up by Evie, and maybe she won't even carry on, but maybe she'll try to find the next V, try to find the next person who's been scorned by the government, and raise them to keep the fight going. I just love that ending. I think it's really powerful and impactful, and I can't help but love V for Vendetta. 2006, The Prestige. I probably expected The Departed. That would be my second choice. But The Prestige is one of the most interesting and cerebral films I've ever seen. Like, this was before I realized that Nolan likes to tell his stories out of order and make you like kind of work post watching the movie to figure out exactly how everything went. And so like on my third or fourth viewing, when I realized that I actually can't remember Hugh Jackman's character's name, but like the fact that he was actually being cloned, like that blew my mind. And like he's creating duplicates of himself and then drowning them all for the sake of a performance. Like he's creating life and then killing it just to get the edge on Borden. Like, that blew my mind. And then the whole thing about Borden being I think The Prestige is such a good movie. And then there's hints all throughout regarding Borden that things weren't what they seemed. And it's just like, whoa, wait a second. That's brilliant. I kind of do want to review some of these movies. If you want me to review any of the movies that I've chosen or will choose later on that I haven't actually reviewed yet, go ahead and let me know. I would love to get around to that. But before I end up spoiling the entirety of The Prestige, let's move on to 2007. No Country for Old Men. That was the first movie that I saw that made me realize that a movie or a game or like any work of art that is story-based can subvert your expectations in a meaningful way. Now, subverting your expectations in and of itself is nothing impressive. I can, for 2008, I could spend the entire time telling you that I'm going to pick The Dark Knight or something, and then when I get there, I pick The Incredible Hulk. That's not impressive on its own, but to subvert your expectations in a way that does make sense given the themes of the story and the setting that it takes place in and the rules that they've set up. What happens to Josh Brolin's character makes 100% total sense. Like, you spend the entire movie waiting for this epic showdown, and then it doesn't happen, because why would it? This is the real world. Things don't always happen that way. But that is not always a good enough excuse. This movie just handled it with such grace that it gets a pass. So, yeah, No Country for Old Men, without a doubt, hands down, easy. Could be Ratatouille on some days, but it's usually No Country for Old Men. Moving on to 2008. Here we have our third tie between Iron Man and Ponyo. Iron Man, not only is it a very expertly crafted first film in the MCU, but thinking about what it ended up representing. Because I give the first Spider-Man movie a lot of credit for what it did regarding the comic book movie landscape. It definitely had a hand in changing it. And if that movie had not been made the way it was, Iron Man likely wouldn't have been made the way it was. But Iron Man kickstarted something amazing, something unbelievable, something unprecedented. And you might not think that that the MCU was that great by and large, but you have to admit it was the most ambitious thing that was like ever attempted in film. You know, like, who would have thought coming out of the theaters in 2008 that we'd be coming up on our 24th film? That's crazy to me. I don't know. Ponyo, I don't have too much to say about it. I mean, it's really beautiful. It's a very feel-good movie. It's definitely emotional in places. Beautifully animated. Every Hayao Miyazaki film, though, is beautifully animated. And I have unfortunately only ever seen it once, so there's not too much that I actually remember from it. But I do remember loving it, and every time I think about it, I have very fond memories. So that's 2008, Iron Man and Ponyo. So moving on. 2009, Inglourious Bastards. Like I said, I am Tarantino's whore. And so anytime he puts out something that's actually like very well crafted, very atmospheric, very interesting, very tense in some areas, like Inglourious Basterds is, I just can't help but get attached to it. I just think that this movie is really good in a lot of places. And it's also very gratuitous in a lot of other places. But overall, the movie ends up being really satisfying to watch. And I've seen it about 6 or 7 times, and I really enjoy it every single time I watched it. Watchmen is also considerable. I really do like Watchmen. But it's really loyal to the graphic novel in a lot of ways that it didn't really need to be. And that led to a lot of people complaining about the fact that there was no giant squid. The giant squid isn't necessary. But the fact that they put the giant squid in the HBO series made a lot of people think that the HBO series was better than the movie because they had the squid. And I'm just like, calamari. But also, don't tell anybody, but I really like Dragon Ball Evolution. It's a horrible movie, but I love it. I love that movie. I gotta get out of here before you guys try to kill me. Alright, so now we're in the second decade of my life. What will I choose? Have my film tastes evolved? Let's see. Scott Pilgrim, 2010. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is like one of my favorite movies ever. It's not the greatest adaptation of its source material, of course. Mostly because the source material wasn't even finished coming out by the time the movie came out. But I just think that the movie does such a good job of capturing the spirit of the graphic novel, because the graphic novel does such a good job of capturing the spirit of being in a video game. And like the whole movie is just so arcadey, and it's just so good. It's so entertaining. Brie Larson's great in it. Brandon Routh, Michael Cera, Mary Elizabeth Winstead is the greatest person to have ever be placed on the big screen. I will always feel that way. I love her. I didn't watch Birds of Prey though, but that's not because of her. That's because of something else. Don't worry about it. But anyway, maybe it's time to move on. Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Yeah. 2011 is going to be Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, and nothing even comes close. Not Thor, not Captain America, not Green Lantern, not X-Men First Class, and certainly not Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I think that Mission Impossible 4 was such a good revitalization for the franchise, because 3 was a good place to leave off. A lot of people didn't like 2, so you would have ended up with a... Why did my monitor just go to sleep? You would have ended up with a good first film, a mediocre second film, and a pretty good third film. J.J. Abrams, But I think the fourth movie was honestly the best one at that point. Which is strange, because usually the fourth one is not very good. Think about Star Wars. Think about Fast and Furious. That doesn't usually happen. But Endgame and Ghost Protocol got away with it. Ghost Protocol raised the stakes in such a organic way too, and then knowing that this is actually Tom Cruise doing all of his own bullshit, climbing the Burj Khalifa, are you kidding me? That seems unfair, but I think that puts it up an extra couple notches, right? I just don't know what I just did, but I just can't. I can't say anything was close to Mission Impossible 4. Also, Jeremy Renner was in it. And then he was in 5. And then he walked away. I think he was supposed to replace Ethan if Tom didn't want to do the movies anymore. But he very clearly does. He's coming back for a 7th and an 8th, but whatever. Moving on. 2012, Django Unchained. I don't know what happened to me. It's definitely not Avengers. It's definitely not Dark Knight Rises. I think, like I said about Tarantino earlier, I am Tarantino's whore. You should understand that by now. This is his 3rd entry on this list. But yeah, I don't know. There's something really satisfying about Django Unchained. And again, it's another movie that ends up being really topical because, you have your characters like Django, like the Doc, like Candy, and like Candy's right-hand man. I actually can't remember his name. But Samuel L. Jackson's character in the movie. It's easy to, you're starting to see who in real life is like each character in the movie, and it's very funny. Because you have your Uncle Tom type of black people, and then you have your white people that are down. They are your road dog. They will go out there, they will fight with you. That sort of thing is very interesting to see in the real world and in this movie. And second place would be tied between Lincoln and Prometheus. Lincoln, not Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer. Lincoln, the Daniel Day-Lewis movie. And then Prometheus is just, it's an Alien movie. As long as it's not Alien Resurrection or Alien Cubed, it's got a pretty good chance of being decent. I say that, but I've seen Alien Covenant. Well, that's a rough one. 2013, Pacific Rim. I love kaiju and I love mecha. Kaiju typically precipitate mecha and vice versa. So when I saw the trailer for Pacific Rim as a wee little babby boy, I was like 11 or 12 years old, I was like, I want to see that. And that was that simple. When it came out, I went and saw it and I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I didn't care too much about the human drama, but I mean, when you're watching a mecha something, that's kind of what ends up happening. You usually just care about the robots versus the monsters. Now, unfortunately, Pacific Rim's good name was tarnished by Uprising. That movie sucked. It was the most nothing movie I've ever seen in my life. That's not true. But I really enjoyed Pacific Rim, and I don't think it needed a sequel. I didn't really understand how there was going to be a sequel, considering that they closed the rift between our world and the kaiju world. But it's whatever. I also like how the kaiju were just called kaiju. Like, okay. But Gypsy Danger has one of the coolest mecha designs in anything I've ever seen, and I really, 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 really like the movie. Second place, Wolf of Wall Street. Very good movie. Martin Scorsese's best modern work. I say that, but I haven't seen The Irishman, so don't hang me. I'm just not interested in The Irishman, It's not that I have any negative feelings towards Scorsese for what he said about the MCU. Just none of the promotional material surrounding The Irishman has really grabbed me, so I just didn't watch it. So, anyway. 2014, we have our fourth tie between John Wick and Kingsman: The Secret Service. Now, here in America, Kingsman: The Secret Service did not come out in 2014. It came out in May 2015. But, considering that it had its English release in 2014, it's easier to just consider it a 2014 movie for the sake of this list, so that it doesn't gum up the works for 2015, because 2015, as you may remember, had some heavy hitters. Now, John Wick is a very good, pure story about a man and his revenge quest, because he's upset that he lost the thing closest to him, all he had left after his wife passed away, all that kept him attached to his regular life post working as a hitman. Now, that is the surface of John Wick. Everything below that, all the world building, the Continental, all the gold coins, all the rules therein, the high table, doing business, all that stuff is super interesting, and it was fleshed out so well in John Wick 2 and 3. I honestly do think that John Wick has one of the most interesting worlds in anything. Not any movie, but anything. I'm talking, even when you put it up against Fallout, or Assassin's Creed, or Attack on Titan, I think John Wick has one of the most interesting worlds. And Keanu Reeves could not have been a better cast for this character. There's not a thing. I've never felt bored watching a John Wick movie. I've never felt disengaged. John Wick is just so good. And then Kingsman: The Secret Service is such a good parody of spy films while also being a competent spy film on its own. I did not like The Golden Circle that much. I think it's fine, but I do think it definitely is nowhere near as good as Secret Service. I think that movie was meant to springboard Taron Egerton's career, and I'm still hoping that it does. I hope Robin Hood from 2018 didn't hurt him too badly. I hope he can recover from that. Samuel L. Jackson made a great villain. Colin Firth made a great mentor, and so did Mark Strong. Honestly, I think every actor that was in that movie, even Mark Hamill, even though he was there for 15 seconds, every actor in the movie served their purpose perfectly. The movie is really entertaining. It's mega cool. It's got such style. I love a stylish movie. That's why I loved Scott Pilgrim so much. Any movie that's got style on top of everything else that it has, amazing. That's why I don't think Zack Snyder's films, by and large, are that great, is because they're style over, substance. And I don't want to, whatever. That's all I'm going to say about that. That's why I didn't pick Watchmen as my favorite 2009 movie, and I chose Inglourious Basterds instead, because Tarantino's style serves everything else that goes on in the movie. Moving on. 2015, we have our fifth tie. It is a 5-way tie between The Revenant, Mad Max Fury Road, The Hateful Eight, Project Almanac, and Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. I don't want to spend too much time on each one of these films because there's 5, But it was actually very hard to narrow it down to just these many. There's so many good movies that came out in 2015. But it had to be a tie this big because I couldn't say that I liked Revenant more than Mad Max or Mad Max more than Hateful Eight. And even Project Almanac is a movie that I don't think a lot of people saw, but it's so good. So going down the list, Revenant is a really good story. You could say it's about revenge, but not 100 million percent. It's also got a lot to do with just a man finding himself again, finding his humanity again, because he becomes a bear man over the course of the story. Not really. Mad Max is just dumb fun. It's super good. The practical effects are amazing. It's got actually a really interesting story. I haven't seen the old Mad Max movie, so Fury Road was the first one that I saw, and I'm like, if this is what Mad Max has in store for me, I'm down. But then I played that awful-ass game. Hateful Eight is one of the most suspenseful films I've ever seen in my life. Again, Tarantino, I love him. I really thought that, like, when I was watching it, I just like not being able to predict what's going on. So, like, even though you know something's going to pop off, when it actually does, you're still just blown away because you didn't expect it to happen that way. Project Almanac is not only my second favorite found footage film behind As Above, So Below. I didn't even bring that up for 2014. That sucks. Project Almanac is also my favorite time travel movie. I love the rules therein. I love the ending that makes it seem like it's a cycle. It's going to repeat itself. So when you're watching the movie, that may have been the first time all that happened, or it could have been the 1,000th time all that happened. It's very clear that this movie does take place in a self-contained time loop. And I honestly really love that ending, because not everything needs to have a happy ending, like I said about No Country for Old Men. And Rogue Nation, again, the second half of the 6 Mission Impossible movies they've been the best. Rogue Nation was so gripping and interesting, and it's hard to say, but I just really enjoyed Rogue Nation. And I honestly hope that they never stop making Mission Impossible movies, even though I know that they will. But we're going to have to just enjoy them while they're here before that happens. So, yeah, that was 2015. 2016, Captain America Civil War. I think that this movie is leagues above the comic book story that it was adapted from. The things happened in this movie for a very believable, organic reason. The characters don't act out of character. They're both... Steve and Tony are both acting irrational because Tony doesn't have Pepper in his life at the moment, and Steve has just lost Peggy. So they're both acting in a way that they wouldn't be normally, but it helps because you're seeing these characters like in their most vulnerable form, and they're both making mistakes. They're both in the wrong, but at the same time, they're both right. And when you're watching the movie for the first time, if you didn't teeter back and forth between is Tony right, is Steve right, then maybe you weren't paying close enough attention. I don't want to be one of those guys that's like, oh, you're watching the movie wrong. But I think the movie does such a good job of balancing that until you realize by the end that they're both wrong. Up until then, it's very easy to be on either person's side. However, the marketing campaign tried very hard to divide the fan base. You're either Team Captain America or Team Iron Man. So most people that were Team Cap went in on Steve's side the whole time. Most people that were Team Iron Man were on Tony's side the whole time and didn't want to be swayed one way or the other. And that is a fault of the marketing. I was Team Cap. I bought a Team Cap shirt. I might have a picture of it. If I can find it, I'll put it up. But I definitely went in wanting to be on Steve's side. But as I was watching, I was just like, I don't know, man. Tony's kind of got a point. Steve's got a point. You know what? They've both got a point. And so, yeah, that's why I enjoyed that movie so much. Don't hang me. Moving on. 2017 is Logan. I tried not to put too many comic book movies on here, but the fact of the matter is a lot of them can be very well made, very beautiful, very relatable. So Logan isn't something that I personally relate to very much, but I love it. I love the character story for the same reason that I love The Last of Us' character story. And with Logan, I think it's honestly a very beautiful film. If you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend watching it. And if you can, if it is within your capabilities, I recommend watching it with your father. I saw it with my dad the first day that it was out, and honestly, it was a completely life-changing experience. Honestly, just like seeing the lengths that somebody will go to for their child by the end of that story, it was just, and it was such a good, powerful, impactful send-off for Logan. I almost cried, and he didn't even die peacefully. You know, I think his death may have been more gruesome than Iron Man's, but I was an emotional wreck by the end of that movie, man. because I don't love the Fox X-Men movies that much, but I love Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, and I always have. I didn't like the Wolverine, I didn't like X-Men Origins, but I loved him. And I honestly think that Logan is the only good movie in this trilogy. And I came away from it with a new perspective, I guess you could say. But that's it for 2017. Moving on. 2018, Spider-Man and the Spider-Verse. I related to Miles very heavily when I was watching that movie. Because I moved from a predominantly black area when I was growing up to a predominantly white area when I continued to grow up, like from second grade on. I felt almost the entire time like I didn't belong. So when I'm watching Miles struggle with that, like, these aren't my people, I don't know how to fit in with these people, I completely related with that. I also understood, like, being interested in a thing that creates a division between one of my family members and brings me closer to another one of my family members. Like, Miles' love for art definitely made him closer to Uncle Aaron than it did to his dad, Jefferson. And me wanting to do this YouTube channel, which has been hit or miss lately, was definitely something that my mom wasn't down for. And honestly, nobody really supported me except for my extended family, some of them. My monitor went to sleep again. But, you know, my mom thought that I was wasting my life doing this and not joining the military. And I understand feeling that way, but at the same time, you have to let someone that you care about make their own decisions, you know? And then by the end of it, when Miles finally becomes comfortable as Spider-Man, and then they start animating him in 24 frames per second, it's such a good visual representation of a character arc. Because if you didn't know, he was actually animated in 12 frames per second to visually represent that he was still clumsy and not perfectly comfortable as Spider-Man yet. But then by the end of the movie, when he is, they animate him in full speed, and so it's really well done. I love that movie, everything about it. 2019, this is the final tie. Parasite and Shazam. I think Parasite is a better Joker movie than Joker. It does such a good job of actually commentating on the different worlds that the rich and the poor live in, and how the rich view the poor. It's an eat the rich movie, right? Obviously, but I think it's so expertly crafted, and the direction is super good. And then, like I said in the review of the movie, about halfway through, a thing happens that you could not have possibly expected, and it changes everything. And it's like, oh, okay, so this is the thing now. Well, now what happens? And then, like, everything that happens after that completely took me by surprise. And I honestly haven't seen it since it was in theaters. I need to buy this movie on Blu-ray and watch it again. I think it was so good. And the only reason that I said Shazam is on the same level is not because Shazam is an equally well-made film. I just relate to Shazam really well because I spent a lot of my life wondering why things had gone a certain way that they went. And I'm like, well, what if it had been this way? Come to find out, it would not have been any better that way. And I spent a lot of time feeling like I was unwanted because I spent a lot of time being outright told I was unwanted. And so when I was watching that movie, I was just like, man, Billy's me. Billy is straight up me. So then by the end, when he, accepts his life the way it is and comes to bond with his new family, and they become the Marvel family, like they're all Marvel, like Captain Marvel type characters, I'm just like, the smile I had on my face, man. And then when he jumps off the roof and yells Shazam, that shot is beautiful. It's so beautiful. But yeah, that's why I like Shazam so much. Not so much because I think it's the best movie, but it's just, it resonates with me on a level that it's hard to explain without telling you my whole life story. But we're almost done. And to round things out, we have The Gentleman. This movie's hilarious, and I honestly think it's Guy Ritchie's best work. I've seen Snatch, I've seen Sherlock Holmes, blah, blah, blah. But I love the way that the story is presented and, telling a story. It's obviously not anything new. But, I don't know, the take on an American genius coming to England to run the weed game and having his right-hand man almost being almost seemingly he's being seduced by, who was definitely perceivable to be the bad guy in the movie. Maybe not even necessarily the bad guy, but like the instigator of everything that goes on. And then like the way everything ends, it's so neatly tied up. It's just like, man, this movie's cool. This movie's really cool. It's also a stylish movie. I really liked it. I like Charlie Hunnam in it. I like Matthew McConaughey in it. For some reason, those are the only people in the cast I can think of their actual names. But honestly, I think it was like the first movie that I saw this year, and I just had a great time watching it. The first movie I saw was either The Gentleman or 1917, but 1917 is a movie from last year. I didn't put it in my 2019 because I just, as beautiful as I thought the movie was, as much as I respected the one-take shot method that they used, I just didn't love it as much as I loved Parasite and Shazam. But that's last year. But yeah, The Gentleman, I had a great time watching it, and I'm comfortable with that probably staying my favorite movie this year, unless, like I said, something amazing happens with Dune or Tenet, which I'm not going to rule out. But I mean, think about how many Christopher Nolan films were not on this list. Inception, Dunkirk, Batman Begins, Dark Knight Rises, Interstellar. Like, I really like Christopher Nolan, but The Prestige is on a completely different level, and I don't see Tenet being on that same level. But those are my favorite movies of every year since I was born. Let me know your list in the comments if you really feel like doing all that work. If you want, I can do my favorite games from every year since I was born, or I can do my least favorite movies from each year I was born. I'm going to do both of those videos, but you control which one happens first. Let me know in the comments which one you want to see. And if you made it this far, this might be like a 40-minute video. But if you made it this far, good for you. Give yourself a pat on the back. I'm honestly impressed. And stay safe out there.